Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today we are looking at Samyra's newest splash that she's made, where she's talking about how parking meters are fat phobic. And it seems like she did upset people on TikTok. There's about 3 TikToks about it, so we're gonna go through each of them and break it down. So let's go.
Why is there diet culture on the parking meters? Why do we have on the parking meters, sometimes I diet, don't feed me on the following holidays? Why are we promoting fat phobia and diet culture even on the parking meters in LA? It gets to a point. It really does get to a point. This is an issue and this needs to be fixed. West Hollywood, this is actually disgusting. Why is there diet culture?
Okay, so I think it's just something super corny and cheesy that they put on there. If you would, it's camp. It's very camp to put that on there. It's just a joke. It's going to be okay, Samyra. That's basically all it is. Now, Samyra is likely, I would guess, within the toxic ritualistic. I don't know if she is for sure, but I'm pretty sure she is. If something like this is enough to bother her, unless if this is performative, then I would assume she is in the TR, because it is such a nothing. And there's even somebody in the comments, which I'm not going to show it because I don't want to talk too explicitly about E followed by the letter D in this video. So there are people even in the comments being like, yes, it really is that real for somebody that has that issue and blah, blah, blah. No. If you are in the TR, you need to get used to real life. You are not, part of the issue of the TR is that you want to control everything all the time. And I think we have to relearn balance. You have to relearn the difference between boundaries and control. There's a difference between the two. This is just trying to be controlling. This isn't making you do anything. This isn't making you go on a diet because you saw something on the parking meter. You don't have to change your behavior at all just because you saw a campy joke in West Hollywood. If you cannot handle even the mere mention of something, that is your problem. I will tell you, it is your problem. You need to desensitize yourself to this stuff. It is a part of life. People talk about it all the time. What are you going to do? Shut yourself away from the entire world? No. Do not hold things like this sacred. Do not hold anything of the toxic ritualistic sacred. It's not going to help you. It is just an anxiety thing. It's not real, and you need to get over it because people are not going to understand it, and people are going to say things sometimes. People are going to write a joke like that on there, and you cannot control the whole world because you have this problem. You need to understand. Learn the difference between boundaries and control. This is kind of controlling here. And again, you don't have to like it. You don't. That's fine. That's totally valid. You could even complain about it. You could talk to a friend and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this said that there. How stupid is that? I didn't think it was funny. That's fine. But there are a lot of people who will think it's funny. You see? So you are entitled to how you feel about something like that, but you're not entitled to force the world to cater to the issue. So remember, find that balance. You can express a feeling, you can feel a feeling, but trying to control it is not helpful because it's not ever going to happen. And if you're in the TR, you're always going to look for something. I would not even notice that at this point. Most people wouldn't even notice it, but she's always looking. And I think that that's partly why I believe she is in the TR, because I think that is so subtle. I don't even know if I would have read that. Honestly, I don't even know if most people would have. Okay, let's continue to the next one. Okay, so she first did like a little text post, so I'm just going to read it. She says, I mean, where TF, I don't know why I'm acting like I don't cuss. I do, but I guess I'm trying to keep it down in this video. I mean, where the F should I really even start? Yes, feeding meters is a common concept, but pairing it with sometimes I diet and don't feed me indeed perpetuates harmful diet culture and fat phobia. Fat phobia is very real, very serious, and affects everyone, regardless of size. And if you're still confused, go read a book. So, we love the smug attitude. I told you. I can be just as smug back. We all can be just as smug. It's not that hard to be smug. I understand it from an activistic perspective. You try to appear confident to get a message across. However, you do need to look at how it's being received, and if this is something that she's doing in order to spark a conversation, I don't know how effective that is. Again, this is where when the TR gets involved in activism, it can get really bad. It doesn't really work. So I think it's kind of a flop take. I'm going to be real about it. I don't think that it's good. I don't think it's effective at all. I think it's more driven by anxiety and by, a toxic ritualistic foundation, I guess you could say, which is why it's not necessarily activistically effective, because most people are probably like, what the hell are you even talking about? It would have been more effective, in my opinion, this is just offering a different perspective, is she would have talked about her experience and how seeing that makes her think. It still doesn't mean that it shouldn't be there. It still doesn't mean this. It still doesn't mean that. But it could possibly help to explain why some people have an issue with it, which I think understanding could be good, and even explaining it can help people with the problem, and it could help the person that has it, as long as they acknowledge that it's wrong to think that way. But that would be somewhat helpful. So let me try. Let's actually try to do that. 1 second. Okay, so it's kind of hard to get it to pause in there because the play button is over it. But it just says, sometimes I diet, don't feed me on the following holidays. And then it lists all the holidays. So if somebody's deeply TR, if I'm thinking about it from a Hinge perspective, somebody sees that and they're simply reminded. So it's kind of like, I feel the pressure to downsize all the time, even if it's not real. I may even feel it within myself. So then when I see it, I think, oh my gosh, I'm so huge. And then I think, oh my gosh, I can't stand that I am. But then I think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't care that I don't like it. And then I think, well, why is this even bringing this up to me when I'm trying to be accepting of it, or I'm trying not to have an issue with it, or I'm trying to continue to justify what I'm doing. Why is this parking meter reminding me that I am big? And so then it's the parking meter's fault. Because people that have this issue, especially if they're very, very severe, you get a rigidity of the mind. A lot of people don't understand that, but you start to think very black and white. There are some hormonal bases for that, but it's also just a way of thinking, right? I mean, the brain wires based on how we think constantly and repetitively. So you start to think very, very black and white. So basically, it's like you're looking at this or you're going through life, and it's like you're constantly trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true, which is basically, it's okay that I'm this big. And you don't even feel that way, personally. But you try to tell yourself you do. So then if any little thing, it can spark doubt, or it pierces something into that like kind of psychological armor, then it causes a lot of anxiety. So somebody will be like, I'm feeling good today. I feel fine. I think I looked okay when I looked in the mirror this morning. Now I'm stepping outside and I'm going to go do the parking meter. Oh my God, I just got reminded of how big I am. And then they're really upset. And then when you're in that state, if your body is very big and you're very, very hypo, or you have a fatty liver, you have like all these problems, when you trigger what's it called? An adrenaline response, it can take the body a long time to come down, typically because your adrenaline is constantly running when you are that big. Because if you're super hypothyroid, which you will become hypothyroid through a great excess of estrogen, through an excess of body fat, your body has to use adrenaline to make up for the lack of thyroid hormone, or the lack of utilization of your thyroid hormone, to still create energy. So when you trigger the adrenaline response, it can take, at times, if it's really, really bad, it could take you like an hour or 2 hours to calm down. And that's with anything. It could be like a fight with somebody. It could be an argument. It could be, you can have a very short fuse, or like I typically had a very short fuse. I'm sure you guys aren't shocked. But it's like, if I was pissed off, I would think about it forever. But when I was really, really big and super in the TR, even if it was something totally unrelated, if I had the tiniest thought that made me scared, I'd go into a full body reaction for almost 3 or 4 hours. And it's like I wouldn't be able to sleep. I couldn't calm my body down. And it's because you're not healthy at all. So that's like at the worst levels. But even if you're just SMO and this happens, you're probably going to have an anxiety issue, or like an anxiety attack for like 30 minutes at least. Because it's like, or maybe even an hour. And then if you're not as big, it can be like 30 minutes, 15, 10, right? It can kind of go down. I noticed it for me, like when I would get angry or triggered by something, it started to, the time that my body would take to calm down shortened as I downsized. But that's something that you guys are not going to understand if you're not very, very big and if you're not in the TR. So that's why that's how I can explain to you why that is so upsetting. Now, there are cognitive defenses to something like that. For example, understanding that we cannot control what people do, or like we cannot control what people say all the time. So you have to accept that. You can't control how other people see you. You know, there's just certain things that are out of our control. And that's very hard for people in the TR to accept, but that's what we have to do. So we start to break that down over time, and then that won't bother you as much on an anxiety level. Or you can even make fun of the idea that that would bother you in your head and be like, oh my God, I can't even believe that made me anxious. That's so stupid. And you just kind of laugh about it because it's kind of dumb. And you kind of get to that point. That can be like a cognitive defense, because it really isn't a big deal. It's something that you're making a big deal. And so that's kind of how it is cognitively. And then, of course, physically, being healthier, normalizing weight, getting rid of fatty liver, all these things will greatly help to normalize estrogen levels and normalize hypothyroid levels, or, you know, normalize your thyroid in general. You know, make sure you get your iron in, or you get your iron up after downsizing, because it's common for it to go down. And also, it's hard to absorb iron when you are obese. So keep that in mind too. So, and if you are anemic, it can make you a little unhinged too. So there's a lot of multiple layers to it that a lot of people don't think about. Obesity affects you in a lot of different ways. So if you're very, very big, then you could be having a lot of psychological issues from it, because it does affect your hormones. It affects your ability to absorb nutrition, especially at such a huge size. So it does affect your body's ability to cope with stress. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that little tiny spark of anxiety can turn into a whole spell that could last 2 hours. And people hear that and they're like, what? And it's like, yeah, don't ever get as big as I was. Okay. Now let's go ahead and continue to the last one.
Let's talk about it. But actually, let's read about it. Now, I am not giving these recommendations for anybody who is determined to be dense and misunderstand anything that I am saying. I am recommending these books to people who genuinely would like to unlearn fat phobia and diet culture. And if that sounds like you, I really do recommend starting with Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. It talks about the racial origins of fat phobia. Yes, racism and fat phobia do intersect. as everything does. And another great book that talks about that same thing is Belly of the Beast by Deshaun L. Harrison. There are so many other books that talk about this topic. These are just some of them. And of course, I understand why people don't think the parking meter is an issue, because we have been conditioned to think that fat phobia isn't an issue. I think that fat phobia doesn't even exist. It is alive and well. So happy reading. Or to those of you who are not going to partake, do whatever you want. I don't know. Do what you gotta do to convince yourself that fat phobia don't exist. The parking meter. Let's talk about it.
So she tends to do this where she just kind of talks about the books and stuff. I mean, you can do that if you want. That's fine. I don't know how effective it is activistically, because I think it's probably better to, well, not that I'm trying to give her a critique, but it's probably better from an activistic perspective to just sit down and actually break down a point and state it quickly. Typically, like especially if it's in a short form content, or like sometimes I will do on posts and things like that, it's shorter. You want it to be clear, but it's hard to make it short and clear with this issue specifically, because it's usually very complicated, which is why when I cover this topic, it tends to be long because we have to go kind of deep, because there's a lot of aspects to obesity and the TR in general. So that's why these tend to be longer, but I gotta do it. Somebody has to, right? But in terms of this, I don't think just throwing books at people is necessarily effective. And it just, again, it comes across as smug, which, again, I understand. I can be smug too. We're going to be exploring smugness in the next era. We're going to exploring ego in the next era, which I'm excited about. So this was vanity. The next one, we're going to talk about ego a lot. So I'm excited. It's going to piss a lot of people out. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it probably will. But anyways, we got more to come in 2026. But anyways, the point is, I can understand the position of like, I'm confident and this is what I'm saying. That does work. I don't think Samyra is completely ineffective, but throwing books at people, I don't think is going to help. Fearing the Black Body in particular, it has a very bad reputation. So a lot of people don't like it. You guys remember Sam at Every Size did a video debunking the book, which I hear is good. I really need to watch it. I'm sorry, I'm a flop. But I just tend to focus on other things on this channel, just because, as far as I'm concerned, fat phobia being racist or whatever, it's just a toxic ritualistic reinforcement mechanism. It's a way to manipulate politics or belief system or other aspects of identity to feed into a cycle, essentially, which people will do with literally anything and everything. I actually did a post where I talked about how even a system of non-belief like atheism can be used to fuel a cycle. So you can use basically anything, and people do all the time. And I try to bring light to that, especially in the Lana era. I've been bringing light to that, but that's how I typically approach it, because I just stay focused on that specifically, on the TR usually. But yeah, there are a lot of people that do talk about fearing the Black Body. It does not have a good reputation. That's the best way I can say it. And she explicitly promotes that one. So I'm like, ooh, I heard that and I'm like, oh, that's going to get a lot of criticism.
But actually, let's read about it. Now, I am not giving these recommendations for anybody who is determined to be dense and misunderstand anything that I am saying. I am recommending these books to people who genuinely would like to unlearn fat phobia and diet culture. And if that sounds like you, I really do recommend starting with Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. It talks about the racial origins of fat phobia. Yes, racism and fat phobia do intersect as every...
Yeah, so that is just the toxic ritualistic. She even says as everything does. So she's saying everything intersects with fat phobia. So again, so she can use all of her political beliefs or all of the aspects of her identity, everything to fuel a cycle. So just keep in mind that is what she is doing. Whether she's aware of it or not, I will call it out. That's basically what you're doing, Samyra. You're using all of that to fuel a cycle, a hinge cycle. So That's basically all it is.
Thing does. And another great book that talks about that same thing is Belly of the Beast by Deshaun L. Harrison. There are so many other books that talk about this topic. These are just some of them. And of course I understand why people don't think the parking meter is an issue, because we have been conditioned to think that.
No. So it's not, what she needs to understand it as is it's not so much that we've been conditioned to not see it as an issue. It's more so that she has conditioned herself to be hypersensitive to it through the TR. That's what it is. So there are some people who are also hypersensitive, but it is not that common. And most people are not, because most people are not absolutely obsessed with this type of thing. And that is what I think she needs to understand. When you get obsessed with something and you think about it over and over and over and over, and people do not understand like how often a person thinks about this, especially when severe. It's every single day. It's hours a day at times. It's like, again, I've talked about how people can look in the mirror, 4 to 5 minutes goes by and it feels like it's been a second. You know, I've even had some moments with looking at like pictures of myself. Like, and this was not even like, I've been out of the TR for, you know, I haven't been doing it at all for 5 years. And I was just downsizing. I was in a downsizing journey and I was trying to compare some before and afters. And I was looking at pictures and I got fixated. And I was looking at it for like over an hour. And people don't understand that that can happen. And then after that happened, I was like, oh, that was bad. Like, that was too long. I was like, no. So you have to kind of catch that. If you see that, realize that that's bad. You know, that's where it really starts a lot of the time, is that. I don't have as many, like, I don't really feel that way as much anymore. Like, it doesn't really happen. It happened sometimes around like the brat era. And then I think it did happen in the mid era a little bit. But again, being mid-size, in my opinion, in and of itself is triggering within the TR. It's very hard. So I think that was when that happened this year. But it hasn't happened at all since I reached average. Nah, don't care. It's over, pretty much. I cannot even believe how dispassionate I am about it. I mean, I literally can't. I never thought I would get here, but it's possible. I'm telling you guys, it's totally possible. But you have to just not obsess for years, and then it goes away eventually because your brain changes. Like, and then you won't, like I said, I probably wouldn't even notice that on the parking meter anymore, you know? But just think of it that way. It's like I'm constantly obsessing, so then I become hypersensitive because I am obsessed. And that's basically what happens. That's what happens within that.
Fat phobia isn't an issue. I think that fat phobia doesn't even exist. It is alive and well. So happy reading, or to those.
So fat phobia, in my opinion, it has to do with the TR. It has to do with the fear of fatness, basically, or a mysticism around it. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know what happens. So it can get you one day. That's kind of how I view it. You know, or if you downsize, it'll mysteriously come back out of nowhere, you know, that kind of thing. It's very superstitious, in my opinion. And that goes across the TR. People with all kinds of them, they have very strange views about fatness that are mystical, that don't make any sense. But in my opinion, that's where it comes from. And so sometimes people will have an internalized issue, regardless of where they are along the spectrum, and then they'll see a fat person and they can't stand them because of it. And it's because of an internalized issue. And it really has to do with the fact that it is so mutable. It's that kind of thing where anybody can become fat. And that's why it's like so rooted in projection, because it's technically available to anybody. So it's different than bigotry, which is how they portray it as bigotry. But no, I think it's more of an anxiety thing. And sometimes anxiety shows up as anger, and people don't talk about that enough, but I think that's pretty much it.
You who are not going to partake, do whatever you want. I don't know. Do what you got to do to convince yourself that fat phobia don't exist. The parking meter.
Okay, well, I did it. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of your day, night, etc. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Talk soon. Bye.